Good day, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on the after-treatment advantage, unlocking the path to emissions reduction. My name is Pooja Das Sharma, and I'm going to be your host and moderator for today's webinar. As facilities like data centers and manufacturing plants get bigger, keeping the power on reliably is important for everyone. But with growth comes new challenges. Emissions are rising, and environmental regulations are getting stricter. Today, we'll discuss practical strategies for emissions reduction and what you need to know in this evolving energy landscape. But before we begin, let's review some safety protocols. Please designate an emergency caller and identify your CPR, AED, and first responders. Please know your high energy sources in your area and implement safeguards. And also, please be aware of your emergency phone numbers, room hazards, exits, and evacuation plans. I would like to iterate that this meeting is being recorded, and by staying, you consent to the recording. If you do not wish to be recorded, we request you to please exit now. Also, please note that any recording from your end or use of note taking or AI bots or any system which directly captures content from this webinar, including Copilot, is strictly prohibited in this meeting. So please refrain from using any of such AI tools. And I encourage everyone to be fully present and engaged during today's session. Whether you're joining from your workplace or tuning in for your home, please take a moment to minimize all distractions so that you can get the most out of this webinar today. We'll be sharing practical information and insights, so your attention and participation will make this experience more valuable for you. If you have any questions or thoughts, please feel free to jot them down in the Q&A section of your right-hand side of the screen, and we'll also have Q&A time at the end of the session as well. So let's meet our presenters for today's session. First up, we have Paul Cook. Paul is a senior product consultant in the Large Electric Power Solutions division within the energy and transportation segment of Caterpillar. With extensive experience in the after-treatment space, Paul works closely with our dealers and customers in the application of these products to meet their specific project needs. And joining Paul, we also have Tony Goyer. Tony is a senior manager, key accounts at Caterpillar, leading commercial strategy for major data center clients, including Microsoft, Cloud HQ, and Digital Realty. Previously, he led global product strategy for large gas and diesel systems, including aftertreatment, aligning engineering and sales to deliver industry-focused solutions. Both Paul and Tony bring in a wealth of experience, and they're here to educate you today, answer your questions, and make sure you leave with actionable knowledge. So get ready to learn from our experts. On the agenda side, Paul will take you through the initial part of today's session, covering the evolving energy landscape and the growing role of diesel gensets in power critical facilities. We'll also explore the tightening emissions regulations and how after-treatment systems offer a smart path to compliance without compromising reliability. You'll also learn what after-treatment is, how it benefits your operations, and the key factors to consider when selecting the right solution. After that, Tony will discuss the value you will get with CAT after treatment offerings and wrap up with a real world customer success story that demonstrates the impact of after treatment in reducing emissions effectively. We hope that by the end of today's session, you'll be equipped to evaluate after treatment options for your own operations. So now that we have set the stage, let's dive into our first section, Introduction and Outlook. I'm going to hand things over to Paul, who will walk us through the current landscape, key trends, and what's driving the need for after-treatment in diesel gensets. Over to you, Paul.
Thanks, Pooja, and thanks everyone for joining today. Data centers are one of the fastest growing sectors when it comes to energy consumption and are expected to consume over 1,000 terawatts of electricity by 2026. As more businesses rely on digital infrastructure, the demand for reliable power keeps rising. In fact, by 2026, data centers alone are expected to use 6% of the United States' total power, which is an unprecedented jump after 2 decades of relatively flat growth. Looking ahead, by 2030, their power consumption could reach 12% of our country's electricity demand. So why choose diesel gensets? Although there are various alternatives for power generation, diesel gensets are still widely used and for good reason. They're known for their reliability, especially when you need power in critical applications. Diesel generators respond quickly to sudden changes in demand and can deliver high power output for large facilities. Fuel is easy to store and access, making them practical for remote sites. Plus, they're durable, require relatively low maintenance, and can be scaled up as your needs grow. That's why, despite new technologies, diesel gensets still remain a go-to solution for many organizations. However, one of the main challenges with diesel gensets is managing their environmental impact. As demand grows, adding additional capacity to your site becomes a real challenge, especially with stricter emissions regulations coming into play. It's not just about meeting your power needs, it's about staying compliant and responsible as you scale up your site. So why should you care about emission regulations? For those with existing diesel engines, it's important to know what's required to remain compliant. Regulations aren't just for new installations. If you're planning to expand your facility or add more power, evolving regulations can directly impact your ability to grow. Staying ahead of these challenges is key to future-proofing your operations. We're seeing many of our customers go back to retrofit existing engines with aftertreatment or making design decisions on new enclosures now to make it easier to add aftertreatment components later. So this can be doing things like making sure the enclosure walls are already supported, or just leaving some space within the enclosure to add the aftertreatment components that we'll discuss later. So whether you're a facility manager, engineer, or decision maker, understanding these factors will help you make smarter choices for your business and for the environment. So let's discuss the evolving regulatory landscape and its impact on diesel gensets. Since 2011, there are two main categories: stationary emergency use engines and non-emergency use engines. For large stationary engines, these are typically called Tier 2 and Tier 4 engines. Stationary emergency use engines can run unlimited hours when there's an actual loss of grid power. These engines may need aftertreatment to meet site-specific emissions, depending on where they're installed. And we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. But typically, these engines don't come from the factory with aftertreatment. On the other hand, non-emergency engines, or Tier 4 certified engines, are designed for continuous operation or load management, and typically have aftertreatment added directly from the factory. Stricter inducement requirements can make these engines less attractive for some sites. So let's take a closer look at how air quality regulations can affect your operations. So looking at this map, certain regions, known as ozone non-attainment areas, have air monitors that exceed national emission air quality standards. These areas are highlighted on the map and are typically subject to stricter emission controls. You can see the majority of these regions are in areas of high population density. The circled areas on the map have recently changed or may change attainment status in the future, as these standards and classifications are periodically reviewed. As you can see on the left-hand side of the slide, the amount of NOx emitted to classify as a major source depends on the attainment status of the region. So the more severe the non-attainment, the less NOx emissions are required to classify as a major source. Classifying as a major source can come with additional regulatory burden. So even if you're in an attainment area, you still have a major source threshold of 250 tons of NOx per year. So depending on your site's capacity, you might still need to consider emissions aftertreatment if you want to scale up your site. So as you look to expand your site's power capacity, staying compliant with emission regulations becomes a critical part of the planning process. This is where after-treatment solutions come in. Tier 2 emergency use only generators can meet Tier 4 emission levels if equipped with the proper after-treatment system. This means you can add more gensets and increase your site's capacity without exceeding regulatory limits. As you can see in the table on the right, you can install significantly more power per site utilizing engines meeting Tier 4 emission levels than you can using Tier 2 engines without aftertreatment, regardless of your site's attainment status. As discussed earlier, do keep in mind that emergency use engines can only be operated for specific regions and durations outside of the loss of grid power. So now that we know that adding aftertreatment can be a practical solution for reducing emissions and increasing your site's capacity, let's take a closer look at the different types of aftertreatment technologies, how they work, and their benefits. So on the left-hand side here, we have selective catalytic reduction, also known as SCR. So the reason it's called selective is because it is selective to NOx. So what we're doing here is typically injecting diesel exhaust fluid, called DEF in the US or AdBlue in Europe, and mixing that with the exhaust gases prior to the SCR catalyst. By doing so, once it passes over the catalyst specifically reduces NOx to nitrogen and water. Moving to the right, we have a diesel particulate filter. So the main function of the particulate filter is to filter out particulate. So these are typically ceramic containers, ceramic filters with alternating blocked walls, which forces the exhaust through the walls where it captures the particulate matter. That particular matter is then oxidized over time to leave an ash, and you do typically need to service the filter for ash. It's a non-combustible ash, so that is one maintenance item for diesel particulate filters. On the right-hand side, we have diesel oxidation catalysts, or DOCs. This technology has been around for a very long time. It can be used to reduce CO and hydrocarbons. Some of those hydrocarbons are what actually causes odor in diesel exhaust. So we have had customers who utilize DOCs to reduce diesel odor. Typically, for Caterpillar, we actually coat our diesel particulate filters with a DOC coating. So you get the advantages of a DOC and a DPF in one piece of technology, so you don't have to have all three types of technology. And all three of these technologies can be combined to reduce emissions, and we'll talk about that here in one of the upcoming slides. So on the left-hand side of this slide, we are showing our clean emissions module, or what we call CEM. The CEM can contain all three types of the after-treatment technologies that we just reviewed. So in our case, we have a DPF, which is coated with a DOC shown in this picture. You can just have a DOC alone if you don't need the particulate matter reduction. You can see below that array of DOCs or DPFs, that is a dual inlet on the CEM, so that's accepting the exhaust from the engine. The exhaust passes through the DOC or DPF, and we have DEF injection after that wall of catalyst. That injection, then we have mixers that mixes the diesel exhaust fluid with the exhaust, and the exhaust does a 180-degree turn and passes through the SCR catalyst. Typically, that's 2 or 3 layers of SCR catalyst, depending on the type of SCR catalyst and depending on the size of the engine and the specific emissions that you need to meet at your site. So again, we can combine all three of these technologies together, or we can just do SCR only. So there are some regions of the country where only NOx is of concern. so you don't need to have a DOC or DPF. When we're talking about Tier 4 final, that typically would require SCR and DPF together. You can see on the table on the right, we are able to achieve very high reductions of NOx, CO, hydrocarbons, and particulate matter. So what are the benefits of aftertreatment? First and foremost, aftertreatment systems help you meet regulatory requirements and reduce your environmental impact, which is increasingly important as standards get tougher. They also give you operational flexibility. With the right aftertreatment, you can expand your site's power capacity without worrying about hitting emission limits or facing any permitting issues. Reliability is another key benefit. Aftertreatment solutions are designed to work seamlessly with your diesel gensets, helping you maintain consistent performance over the long term. And that's one of the key benefits of working with Caterpillar. Obviously, we are the manufacturer of both the genset and the emissions system here. So Tony will cover that a little bit later, but this is one of the key benefits of working with Caterpillar. We are experts on both the genset and the emissions system, so we can make sure that both of those systems are working seamlessly together. For facilities in non-attainment areas where air quality standards aren't being met, aftertreatment is often essential to keep operations running and avoid costly shutdowns or fines. So this slide is demonstrating the complete aftertreatment system and how the different components that are needed to make the system work properly. So obviously on the bottom left, we have a beautiful CAT genset, and then we have our aftertreatment system sitting above. Typically, if you're doing enclosures, this would be sitting on top of the enclosure with all the other componentry that's on the right-hand side of the slide inside the enclosure. You can also do within buildings. We've seen these our aftertreatment systems installed on the ceiling, and we have an example of that in our customer success story that Tony will talk about later. So the SEM and the dosing cabinet are the two main components of the SCR system. The dosing cabinet you can think of as the brains of the overall system. The SEM we talked about earlier, so that contains the appropriate catalyst recipe for whatever regulations you're trying to meet on site. Below the dosing cabinet, generic air compressor is shown. The systems that we use for our large electric power engines are called air assist. So we are using compressed air to atomize the DEF into the exhaust stream, and we are also using it to cool the injector tip to make sure that the DEF does not crystallize and clog the injector lamps. We also have a DEF tank shown, more of a tote style. In an enclosure, you may have the DEF tank in the base of the enclosure, or you may have one large DEF tank feeding multiple dosing systems. Usually in data center applications, because of redundancy, we do see many of our customers having all of these systems redundant for each engine, but we have also seen situations where we might have one air compressor feeding two different SCR systems or one tank feeding multiple dosing systems. So really it's up to how you're engineering your site, and one of the key considerations that you need to take into account when you're designing your overall site. Also shown is the DEF transfer pump. So this is to get the DEF from the tank or storage area to the dosing cabinet itself. So now that we've explored the components of aftertreatment systems in detail, let's shift our focus to what really matters when you're choosing an aftertreatment solution. So in this next section, we'll walk through the key considerations you should keep in mind when selecting your aftertreatment solution. So starting on the left, and I've referred to this earlier as well, we really do need to know what specific emissions that you need to reduce. So depending on the answer to that question, we will then design the system with the appropriate after treatment technologies that we covered in the system itself. If you just need to reduce NOx, then we would only include an SCR system, for example. If you need to meet Tier 4 final emission levels, likely you're going to need an SCR system and a diesel particulate filter. So the answer to that question, and just making sure you understand your permit and how much you need to reduce which components, is a very important part of the process. Also, site conditions like ambient temperatures and altitude. DEF is a fluid that I call it a Goldilocks fluid. It doesn't like too hot. It doesn't like too cold. It can degrade over time. So really need to understand the temperature of the site. Make sure that you're taking care of the DEF so you get the maximum life out of your DEF. Altitude can impact engine emissions with regards to temperature and emissions themselves. So really knowing more, the most we can about your site, really helps us to design the after treatment system appropriately for your specific site. Sound requirements is another one. These SEM systems do have inherent sound silencing capability, but if you're close to a school or close to some other receptor or a neighborhood, then we may need to add additional silencing capability into the entire enclosure. Back pressure is another important consideration under the design and installation category. We're not going to touch on every one of these, but I'll just touch on a few. So back pressure is an important one. We are starting to see stacked enclosures. So, the bottom unit may have to have a design for more back pressure capability than the top unit, depending on how all the routing of the exhaust system goes. Space considerations in terms of, is it a new enclosure, or are you trying to fit all of these components into an existing room? Obviously, trying to fit everything into an existing room, you may have space constraints. You may have to change the design of the SEM, for example, which we'll talk about here in the next slide. And then under supplier, really, trying to work with a company that has a lot of experience in this field of emissions and after treatment. Caterpillar has been in this field designing after treatment equipment for our engines that are being used in a variety of industries. We have an entire team of after treatment experts who are engineering these and in various applications. So we're a company who have much experience in this space, and Tony will talk about some of those things in the next section. So here we're showing the different after treatment configuration options that I just mentioned. So depending on, even if you're doing a new installation, you may need a different inlet and outlet configuration based on the design of your room or your enclosure. So we do offer a variety of different inlet and outlet configurations as part of our standard options for these systems. We do have two different types of dosing cabinets depending on the type of SCR catalyst that we're using. So we have both a low flow and a high flow DEF cabinet. And then we have a variety of different options, either directly from Caterpillar or working through our dealer network to help provide you with the additional componentry required for the system to operate properly. So a variety of different options available through either Caterpillar directly or through our dealer partners. And I'll hand it back to you, Pooja.
Thank you, Paul, for educating us about after treatment, its benefits, and what to consider when selecting an after treatment solution. Now, let's get specific to what Caterpillar brings to the table, and to walk through the details, I'm going to hand things over to Tony. Over to you, Tony.
Thank you, Pooja. And Paul, thanks for the background on the technical side of why after treatment's needed and why what CAT has to offer from that system. So, as you guys know, most of you that are on the phone are probably at least familiar with after treatment, right? And you know that there are many suppliers out there that have different types of after treatment systems. So this next section, we really want to talk about why Caterpillar. Why buy the Caterpillar product? Why buy from us versus from a third party? And the answer to that is, I mean, there's several reasons behind it, but Caterpillar, people are used to what Caterpillar offers from a technical solution on anything, whether it be off-highway truck, whether it be a genset, whether it be an enclosure, whatever it happens to be, people know Caterpillar. And the after treatment is no different. When we look into the technical aspect of it, there's a seamless integration. We know our gensets, we know our after treatment, our engineering teams that design both of those work day in and day out together. They know how the systems operate. They know how to put the systems together. There's the peace of mind side, right? We are proven on the performance. We're trusted with the technology. We have a dealer background or a dealer network behind us that we'll talk about here in a minute. All building into the reassurance piece. So making sure that what you buy, whatever the emission standards that you need to have on your site, you're compliant with them and that there's no problems behind any air permitting, any NOx emissions, anything like that. You can be assured that with a complete CAT system, that those units are going to be compliant with whatever that air permit has. Talking about support, obviously the CAT warranty applies just like any genset, any dozer, any off-highway truck that we may offer. The CAT warranty, we stand behind our product. We're sure that product works. If you do run into issues, you've got the full CAT warranty behind it, as well as the option for extended service contracts and things like that on your full solution. And that full solution could be anything from a genset with an after treatment to a full enclosure that is designed and manufactured by Caterpillar. And then the last thing that I want to point out, the easy financing piece, right? You guys, most that are on the phone, know about CAT Finance. We have some very unique offerings that help spread those costs across many years. Obviously, with the backing of Caterpillar on the financing, the after treatment is no different than anything else that you typically would work through and finance through our CAT Finance. If we dig into this a little bit, so the seamless integration piece, it really boils down to making life easier on a customer or an operator at the site. And this is a unique feature that Caterpillar has to offer with the new integration of our CAT ECS controller that's on our gensets. I'm sure that many of you have heard a lot about the ECS piece already, so I'm not going to focus entirely on that. But with that ECS, you're used to seeing the EMCP be able to control the genset. The ECS now can control the genset. It also controls the site. The interesting thing when you bring in the CAT after treatment is our teams are in the final validation phases of bringing the controls of the after treatment right into that ECS controller as well. That's something that nobody else that builds the after treatment can do, right? Because it's proprietary information, proprietary controls on the ECS side. And now we've got one controller that can control your genset, it can control your site, and it will control your after treatment system. So you don't have to worry about multiple controllers, less failure points, things like that, to really make sure that all of that seamlessly integrates together. And that is a major, major value that Caterpillar has to offer when we talk about us versus some of the competitors that we have in the after treatment field. Ultimately, and it all saves time and resources to the customer. Peace of mind. Obviously, if you're a customer that's on the phone, a consultant, or even one of our dealers, peace of mind is very important to anyone, whether it be a consumer that's purchasing a car or a home, clear to one of our customers that are building, data centers, hospitals, things like that. Peace of mind is very important for everyone, and that's one of the areas that Caterpillar, really prides itself on. We have the largest dealer footprint across the world, really. I know that most of the people that we're talking to today are North America based, and we have a very, very good dealer base in the United States. But, as we bring that outside and look at the rest of the world, we have the best of the best when it comes to the dealers. All of these dealers are obviously trained and very familiar with the gensets, right? That have been out there for lots and lots of years. Many of our dealers in the United States are already trained on our after treatment system. We have new trainings coming up to make sure that we have a much more broad network of dealer trained personnel on the CAT after treatment, all to help out with the customers on whether it be commissioning, installation, or in one of those rare circumstances where there is a failure and needs to be resolved very quickly. We will have all of our dealers trained and ready to go, just like they are for the gensets. And that means that the dealers have the ability to dispatch their technicians in a timely manner to get a site back up and going if there's a problem, or to schedule out the commissioning piece of it. And obviously, our dealers know exactly how to get a hold of the CAT factory, right? So we have customer service engineers, we have training engineers. We also have the design engineers on standby in the factory. If a dealer gets to a site, can't figure something out with the after treatment system, they have the ability to come right back into the CAT factory and talk to, in many cases, the same engineer that designed the system to help them work through that problem and get the site back up and going. Talking about the reassurance side of the product. So obviously, people are buying the after treatment because they need to reduce the emissions. And some companies are doing different things. Some maybe are not quite as reliable as others. And from a Caterpillar standpoint, we are designing to meet the most stringent emission regulations. Paul talked through the different combinations that can be put together by our teams and by the after treatment systems. Not everybody's going to need all of those, but you can rest assured that no matter what combination that is put together for your particular site, we have gone through the rigor to ensure that the standards are going to be met. It's going to perform the way that we say it is. Those things that we look at, right, are as we're going through design, we're looking at thermal management, we're looking at sound, we're looking at how to integrate that all together with our control system, like I talked about a little bit ago. And not everybody can do that because they don't have the ability, they don't have the genset manufacturing, and they don't have the full system under their belt like Caterpillar does. As we have designed our system, our after treatment system, we have used the exact same internal standards that we use on anything that has the CAT name on it, right? So if it's a skid steer, if it's a backhoe, if it's our gensets, we use the same internal rigor and the same internal standards when we go through the development process of that. So everything is held to the same standard that has the CAT tag on the side of it, and after treatment is no different. So ultimately, what that means to a customer, to a consultant, to a dealer, the reliability and the durability of our product is what you've come to know with Caterpillar, and the after treatment is no different than anything else that you're purchasing from us. The support side, I touched on this a little bit, but it's very important, and this is where Caterpillar hangs their hat, right? Because lots of people manufacture products. Not all people can support their products. And that's one of the major milestones of Caterpillar is the support side of things. We have the warranty. We have the service teams, whether it be the dealer teams or the CAT internal teams. The warranty, we stand behind our product. We know that product is going to work. We understand that there's going to be failures here and there. We try to minimize those as much as possible to minimize the downtime and make sure the product's operating when it should. But in those rare cases when there is a problem, you have great warranty support, you have great service support, and we will get you up and going as quickly as possible to minimize that downtime, because we fully understand downtime is lost money for our customer site. We work to control those unexpected costs, right? And this goes back to the validation and the durability that we talk about. If something's not validated properly, or if something doesn't operate properly out of the box, there are unexpected costs. You'll see that with some of the third parties that do produce after treatment. And that is something that we work really, really hard and really diligently to make sure that those unexpected costs don't arise. And when they do, in a lot of cases, we stand behind those. So this system with our after treatment, just like our gensets, if you purchase the full system from us, those warranties can all be bundled. Your service plans can all be bundled. Your extended service plans can be bundled. And you know exactly when something goes down, that you contact Caterpillar, you contact your dealer, they'll get in touch with us. Unlike if you have, 3 or 4 different vendors all connecting to the engine, if there is a failure, maybe that third party after treatment caused an engine failure, and now you're sitting in the situation of, I don't know whether I need to talk to the after treatment supplier. I don't know whether I need to talk to the genset supplier. That is not the case when you purchase from us. And we, it's the same organization, the same dealers, the same warranty process on everything. And there's no opportunity for finger pointing at that point, because it's all a CAT solution that comes back to us. Lastly, that I'll talk through here is the financing piece. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the financing. I think many of you most likely are very familiar with the finance, but obviously we offer extensive financing options, no matter what the product is, whether it's balance of plant, whether it's the genset, whether it's after treatment. In this case, we have the ability to finance a customer, help the dealers through that financing, and make sure that the full solution is ready to go on a timely manner. This is something unique to Caterpillar, compared to several others when it comes to the full financing ability of a complete site, right? And after treatment falls right into that. So I'm going to jump into a customer case with you now. It's kind of tying everything back to the real world, everything that Paul talked about, everything that I just talked about. We'll look at one particular site that we very nice site. I was actually just at it a couple weeks ago. One of my major customers, Cloud HQ, came to us several years ago. They wanted to build a large greenfield data center. They were talking about at the time 500 megawatts of capacity being on this site. It was the largest site that they were producing at that time. And they had a unique situation where the location of this site, the air permits just flat were not going to work with their backup power and the number of gensets that they had to put on the site. So that luckily they came to our local dealer in the area. The dealer engaged us. We started talking through the situation, and it was very apparent that putting an after treatment system on these gensets was going to take care of their problem. We were able to reduce the NOx by 90%. From what raw engine out NOx would look like in this particular site. Their air permit was no issue once that was brought into the plan. And it really ties back to the slide that Paul had earlier in this presentation, where you talk about the number of engines, you talk about the number of hours that each of those engines can run with and without after treatment. And there's no way possible that this site would have got 500 megawatts of capacity on one particular site without this after treatment. So it's a great example of where, the customer had a problem. They brought it to the dealer and Caterpillar worked together. We came up with this wonderful solution to really make sure that the site could get the power that they needed and have the hours of operation that they needed. it turned into basically a seamless one-stop shop for our customer. They know that if there's any problem with the pieces that are showing in that picture, they're coming back to the cat dealer and they're coming back to the cat factory to make sure that things are taken care of. And obviously we stand behind that with our warranty and our service contracts that we have in there. So just a great example of a customer solution that we were able to pull together with our after treatment and our gensets. The last slide, and then I'm going to pass this back over to Pooja to take some Q&A piece. But let's look at, ultimately what we learned in this session and what we've talked about. Both Paul and I have talked about in this. Obviously, after treatment's expanding. No question about that whatsoever. Many, many more areas of the United States, many, many more areas of the world are getting much more strict on their emissions requirements. And what that means is after treatment has to come into play when you're talking about that. We do have offerings. We have lots and lots of different configurations of offerings. Those offerings will fit for new installations, whether it be a brand new data center that's just being built or a brand new hospital that's just being built. But we also have the ability to retrofit existing sites. So keep that in mind as you have a customer that's maybe expanding, or if you are a customer that's expanding a site or looking at their sustainability goals for the next few years and need to put after treatment in, we can drop the after treatment on an existing engine as well. It does not have to be a brand new engine for that to work. So the biggest thing that I can stress out of the section I talked about was the seamless integration, right? Nobody else in the world can offer the integration of the genset, the enclosure, the after treatment, the controls like Caterpillar can, because nobody else touches all of those components like we do. So the integration and the sales and support are massively big benefits on the Caterpillar side, both from the commissioning, from the service, and from the operation piece of it. And the last thing, I didn't touch on it a whole lot, but the delivery times and the lead times, we do have a massive expansion that was just finished in the last few weeks. We have very, very good delivery times. We do not have constraints on those lead times and those quantities that we've had in the past. So if you have used Caterpillar or have looked at Caterpillar in the past and lead times didn't work or quantities didn't work that you needed, I urge you to come back and chat with us one more time, because that is not a constraint any longer. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is make life easier for everybody. Nobody necessarily comes out and says, hey, I want after treatment on my genset. You're forced to do that. So our job is to make that as easy as possible, make the integration, make the installation, and make the service piece as easy as we possibly can. And that's what we are striving to do and will continue to strive to do as we expand our offerings and expand our services that we have with this. So I think that's my last slide, Pooja. I'll pass it back over to you and let you take control of the rest of the conversation.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you for sharing the value of Caterpillar after treatment offerings and that great real world example with the audience. We now open the floor for question and answers. Several of you have already typed in some questions during the presentation, and our experts have already replied to you, but this is the time. If you have some other questions, please type it in the Q&A section so that we can take up with the experts directly. Okay, we have one question that has come up. For data centers that nearly all have multiple generators, is there typically a single DEF tank for multiple gensets, or does each genset have its own DEF supply?
Paul, you want to take that one?
I can take that one. Thanks, Pooja. Yes, very good question. So it really depends on the customer and the layout of the site. So I would say for data centers in particular, there is typically a lot of interest in redundancy. So having all of the components that I mentioned, the air compressor, the depth transfer system, the tank, all for each enclosure, I would say is fairly typical. However, we have seen several sites as well where one large DEF tank is used to feed multiple systems. So there's no right or wrong way to do it. I would say in general, it's really a customer's choice. May also depend on how much space they have available at the site.
Thank you. Hope that clarifies the question. We have another question that has come up. How do we monitor the after treatment system for performance or failure during the life expectancy of the equipment? Is there a signal that can be routed through the facility SCADA system for monitoring the after treatment system?
Yes, I can take that one as well. So yes, very good question. Yes, we do. So we do monitor the performance of the after treatment system. These are closed loop systems, so we are monitoring both the inlet and outlet NOx concentrations. We know how much the system needs to reduce NOx based on the customer's request and the customer's permit. So we're also monitoring several other parameters like back pressure and exhaust temperature. So we are able to diagnose if there's a particular issue that we're seeing and able to send that signal to a customer's building management system to alert them that there is an issue that they should explore.
Thank you. I'm just looking through if we have any other questions that we have not answered yet. Question is, does adding a CEM make it a Tier 4 certified engine from the factory?
It does not. So it is. You do not change the engine certification by adding after treatment post factory.
I think it's important to note, the emissions out of this are very, very similar to what the Tier 4 certified would have. We do have Tier 4 certified product available, but that is not what this system is designed to do. So if this is really there to get you under your local air permits, air regulatory requirements, items like that, really for the standby application. If you're going to go outside of a standby application, we do have Tier 4 certified. It looks very similar. It acts very similar, but there are a few other requirements that the EPA makes us put in the system to actually give it the Tier 4 certified stamp.
All right. Thank you, Tony. Just looking through the questions.
I think there's a question there, Pooja, about lead times as well.
Yes.
Has
I'm
that
just
one been
looking through
answered
that.
already?
I don't think so. So the question is, what is the expected lead time on the after treatment components? Are they in alignment with 3500 lead times?
Yeah, so I don't know the exact number that we have published. Paul, do you recall the number that is actually published for after treatment currently?
I think it's 30 to 40 weeks.
Yeah, but what I would say is, depending on the different configurations that you have, could pull that into a much shorter lead time. It could stretch that out a little bit. We are well within what the genset lead times are, the last that I checked. So that is all published. The dealers have access to all the publications of what we are committing to on lead times currently. And there is currently no issue with getting after treatment in the same amount of time as you're getting a genset.
All right, we do have another question on the chat. For CAT CHP applications, is the heat recovery downstream of the after treatment? Does extraction of the waste heat and lowering the exhaust temperatures impact the emissions in any way?
So just in general, yes, having a in a CHP application, that is one of the challenges when using CHP along with after treatment, because after treatment does have specific, depending on what type of catalyst you're using, and a lot of other potential, site specific requirements. Um, you typically need to put the SCR up front of the CHP. But there's, it really, that's really getting into very specifics around the design of the overall system. So we need kind of some more information. It could depend on what specific engine you're using, because some engines run much hotter than others. How far away is the SCR and the CHP? So that's getting into a really specific discussion. But just in general, I'd say yes, you need to consider the location of the CHP equipment and the SCR equipment when you're looking at designing a site with both.
Thank you, Paul. I don't see any other new questions on the chat. Hopefully, we have answered all the questions, either separately on the Q&A or through this live discussion. So, all right. So, moving on, what's your next step? We have uploaded some handouts for you that you can download from the handouts tab of this in the right hand side of your screen. And for more information on CAT after treatment offerings, please contact your local CAT dealer for a consultation. The link has been also shared in the handout. And if you're interested to see more real world success stories or access product information, please follow us on CAT Electric Power on LinkedIn. Again, the link has been shared with you in the handouts section. And if there were any other questions, please feel free to get back to our dealers so that we can discuss them with you in detail. So we thank you for attending today's session. We appreciate your time and engagement, and we hope that this session was useful to you to learn about after treatment and helps you make informed decisions in the future. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day ahead.